Stalking my way through Europe, hunting and mapping lost and interesting bunkers, brought me here to a series of interesting, elongated bunkers, near an enormous chemical plant, not far from Breslau. I found myself in the middle of the huge Blechhammer chemical complex. Today, this is a Polish town and a factory that all once belonged to Germany. So it started with a hint that something was here. And then I found out that something was here. It looks like a bunker, looks like a shelter. And there's not just one of them, there's a lot of them. The interesting thing is, it's right next to this, and this does not look like a young place either. Now there's a World War II relation to this, the giant cooling towers and the chemical plant over there that resembles that of Project Riese. However, let's start from, well, one end and see what we can see. Blechhammer. Now there's an ungodly amount of overgrowth here, so not a lot of people come here. And oh, here's the spiky things. There's always spiky things around here. Spiky things in eyes, claw, neck. Oh, Jesus. Oh my God. Bloody hell. We have a seriously protected entrance, and we have weatherproofing, tar, black. And there must have been some here too, because there's runoff off it. So, nice and windy today. So there was a door. There's hinges, that's it. And then protected entrance from both sides. And here are the big steel doors, or at least used to be. Okay. So, okay. Production wood in place. Yeah. Hangers for emergency entrance, perhaps. Get a bit of ventilation here. And it looks like, somebody may still be using it. Is this stores? No, thank you so much. I appreciate that. We have a protected entrance, protected from the outside. Here was a heavy steel door blocking off what looks like ventilation. So the ventilation here is apparently at least considered for what I'm assuming is an air raid shelter. Ventilation pipe. So this door here is new. This probably would have taken in use by Polish Army Cold War at some point, maybe. At least that door, or somebody could have used it for something. It's not cold in here at all. Cables. There's electricity in here. Construction wood is in place everywhere. That was for panels, and you had blast panels inserted here, so even if there was something that would have come in, these walls would have at least stopped, partially stopped the blast from continuously traveling. And you never want to be in a tube That is just open inside. That makes everybody inside into sandwiches. Alright, so like I said, there's been some post-war use, since that bathroom is definitely newer. But that doesn't change the layout and the fact that there's a lot of them. The next protected entrance. And utility room, I assume. Another bathroom there. I think this is, and here's the sink. Why is there a sink? Again, post-war use. Don't know if there was plumbing for any of this during the war. I'm thinking there's a huge chemical plant, a huge factory here. So of course they built multitudes of shelters and also flak bunkers, one-man bunkers, and so on and so forth, as they would for a chemical plant. Now the question is, who was this for? Was it for the laborers, the workers, the concentration camp prisoners? Who was it built for? Since it is just, let's face it, slapped together on the roof. Let's face it, it is just put together on top of a hill here, or not even hill, but the reinforcement is decent. And another blast wall. All right, so last wall, last wall. There's a little ventilation intake. Now obviously, due to the power lines being right above it, I cannot fly over it. Old red brick there. Or this is obviously not the power plant, but transformer station. And then there's the big towers there. So part of this was part of the Hammond-Göring vacuum system. Look at the large legs there of the cooling towers. It doesn't actually look like the henge. Not really at all. This one down there as well doesn't look that way either. I thought this was just a little on-the-ground shelter. This is an entrance underground. Oh, so many spiders come here. Oh, there's a spider over there. Oh, it is just a little shelter underground. This is literally it. Reinforced roof, huge. Huge dirt mound on the top, about 200 meters away. Fortunately, also right under the power lines, since the power plant is all in there. so I can't fly over it, but we can get a little closer. I think this may be on the property of the still operating power station, and that's fine. I know there's at least one more of these that has been turned into a museum, but there's quite a few actually. If you really start looking for them here, and you look at the old fences, yeah, same design. It looks identical to the other one in every way, and here you see that the protective walls are just simply red brick that's covered. Originally, here was a coking plant, which after 1933 was eventually turned into a synthetic fuel production plant, using the Fischer and Tropsch synthetic method, eventually producing about a ton of fuel for every 7 tons of coal. The plant eventually fell under the Hermann-Göring 4-year plan, and it did create a lot of new jobs here, as well as vast expansion of the canal leading here, which was opened in 1938. Also, new roads were of course constructed here, but the canals were constructed in order to bring coal to the plant using barges, using a very elaborate and highly modern for the time transport and logistical system. Later, a coal hydrogenation plant was installed at Blechhammer for the production of gasoline under IG Farben. This was a significant industrial complex during the war. It predominantly consisted of 2 major chemical plants, Blechhammer North and Blechhammer South, which were critical to the German war effort due to their production of synthetic oil and other chemical products. Eventually, during this time, some 4,500 prisoners would work here and in the surroundings. Most laborers were from Auschwitz, some 400 men from Theresienstadt, and also hundreds of Allied prisoners of war worked here. Thus, several prisoner of war camps were constructed around the town and the plant. The synthetic fuel plant started operating on April 1st, 1944, because nothing says April Fools like fake oil. Now, it was a huge complex, and it was very hard to hide. And also the Polish Home Army had several spies working here who passed on information on the plant to them and to the Allies, who would begin to bomb German oil and fuel production plants from 1944. One of the more known of these bombing raids was that of Polesti, which was bombed by B-24 Liberators from a very low altitude, literally flying between the chimneys. So low, in fact, that some of the fuel explosions actually caught the planes, which some of them caught fire too. By July 1944, the closest Allied bombers within range were North Africa and then Italy. And the briefings for the crews were given quite interesting. It was about how to avoid flak, and given just how much flak the Germans at times could throw at them, I'm sure that any advice was better than none at all. However, there were over 250 flak guns positioned around the plant. And although many of the operators were extremely young, actually going to school in the daytime when not on duty, they still managed to take a heavy toll on the bomber crews. Yet the plant was bombed repeatedly, at least 18 times, and adding a few smaller bombings, dropping at least 7,000 tons of bombs on this place. During the heaviest raid on June 7, 1944, 555 bombers and over 350 escort planes bombed the factory. Over 220 planes were shot down on that day alone. But that raid did give us one of the most iconic photographs of the air war. Still, amazing that half of the crew of this plane did survive the bailout. I'll tell you the story in a minute. Post-war analysis claimed that somewhere between 10 and 25% of the bombs actually hit within the complex grounds, despite being dropped from about 23,000 feet. Now, there were small villages and civilians living all around the plant, and many of these lost their lives. Also, many of the forced laborers died during these raids, and some of the airmen shot down were actually lynched by the civilians who had lost homes and family members. Sad, but I suppose understandably from their point of view. And to add to the misery, when the Russians took the town in 1945, at least 26 more civilians and the town priest were shot by them. So it is little wonder that so many of these little shelters were constructed for the workers and technicians here. It was constructed relatively cheap design and easy to build by the labor battalions here. And in one of them, a group of volunteers created a little museum. And I arrived just the day where they had a family event. Here they display a lot of the artifacts found on the grounds here. And there's a quad 4 for the kids to play. After Germany's surrender in May 1945, the Soviet Union, of course, dismantled the Blechhammer plants, removing equipment and infrastructure, and the area was handed over to the Polish, and many of the former Germans here were expelled. Bits and pieces. Bits and pieces from the air raids from the planes that were shot down here. And given how many of the planes were shot down around here, it's hardly a surprise that so many artifacts can still be found around the neighborhood. And it's not like there's not a lot of them, and it's not like they're not being put to good use. This one even have a satellite dish on top, so you have TV in there. The protected entrance walls are gone, but still pretty much the same. Very interesting little shelter here is. You snail your way in. Oh, there's a semi-protected little circle. Basically a protected back wall behind the little shelter. Now, I did promise to tell you the story of that picture, however. On November 20th, 1944, 400 B-24s and 300 P-51s were scheduled to bomb Blechhammer. The plane in the photo was the lead plane, commanded by Lieutenant Colonel Locke, the commander of the 465th Bomb Group. On this trip, it had its ball turret removed and emplaced with a BTO radar unit and an operator. They took off at 07:42 a.m. and found the target area engulfed in fog, and thus they decided to bomb their alternate target and turned. However, soon after, visibility cleared, and the formation executed a 270-degree turn and a 1,000-feet climb. However, almost immediately after, and before their actual bomb run could begin, their plane was hit in the wing between the fuselage and number 2 engine. And after a few seconds, the wing began coming off, and the plane began to roll. The crew all knew it was doomed, and time to leave. Whalen was unresponsive and probably dead when Cutker jettisoned the bomb load and left the plane through the bomb hatch, parachute in hand, and spent the next 20,000 feet plummeting while trying to put it on, and he made it just in time. Locker abandoned the plane through the top hatch, Duckworth left through the top turret hatch, and Hockman managed to put on his chute and get out through the nose wheel bay. Now Rupkin in the top turret never made it out before the plane exploded. Rice was stuck in the front ball turret in the nose without a chute, and electronics no longer working. He could not get out. The explosion threw Bourne and Billings clear of the plane, and they managed to deploy their chute somehow, not remembering how. Flynn, the tail gunner, also never made it out. The Luftwaffe report on the raid was that Blechhammer South was moderately damaged and 18 U.S. planes were shot down. Several of the flak crews were killed and a lot of civilians as well. However, production would continue several days after the raid. It's interesting to travel the countryside and stumble across a series of bunkers, and then after that discover the amazing stories that came from just a few simple structures. It's a good reason for me to continue, and a better reason for you to continue to subscribe and watch my videos. Or else.
My name is Tino Struckmann. I run Lost Battlefields. Every year, I travel around the world to try to bring you to all the most interesting historical military locations from modern wars and the World War II special projects, battlefields, forts, fortresses, and tunnels, everything else. Things you may not be able to see or go to yourselves. Please join me on Patreon or join Lost Battlefields through the website so you get access to all my files and my notes. It really does help, and like, follow, share here on the channel if you can. That helps too.